Good afternoon, everybody. David Shuster here on Take Action News. Welcome to the program. This is the weekend of March 23rd edition. So glad to have you on board. We've got a lot to talk about today. We'll be talking about President Obama's trip to the Middle East. We'll get some reaction from that from Charlie Mitchell of Take Action News. Also, Cliff Schechter and We Act Radio. The latest is going on in gun control. Some interesting developments this week in the United States Senate. Harry Reid making a decision to try to not take a risk and essentially try to move a bill that will only include background checks and gun trafficking provisions, a ban on assault weapons and a ban on high-capacity magazines. That will not be part of the underlying bill, so it'll be somewhat watered down. But we'll talk about all of this coming up. Daniel Marans, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing all right, David. I'm putting on my black
this
football
is actually
paint.
not a live show today, although parts of it will be live. Danny and I are taping some of the show on Friday, March the 22nd, and we've had a few interesting technical issues. But you know, that's radio, that's broadcasting. Things don't always go swimmingly. You've got so many pieces of equipment and moving pieces here that that's part of what makes you a man, Daniel Marans, is when you have to overcome adversity.
It's part of what I guess fledgling independent progressive media is like, that's for sure. But it certainly put hairs on my chest.
Absolutely. I got to ask you about an interesting story this week, and special hello to everybody who's listening to us in our Washington, D.C. listening audience. We're going to pause in about 4.5 minutes and let our syndicated stations catch up with us. But for our Washington, D.C. listeners, Daniel, and this is an audience that is very concerned about the issues of LGBT, gay rights, gay marriage. And, of course, everybody in the Washington, D.C. area is quite familiar with the Westboro Baptist Church. Those are those crazy right-wing fanatics who show up at military funerals and try to picket, and they picketed at the Obama girls' schools. They have signs that say God hates fags and all the other offensive stuff that they do. So everybody in Washington, D.C., of course, is familiar with them. Well, they're based in Topeka, Kansas, and this past week, there was an activist who normally is involved in environmental activism, but he had an opportunity to buy a house across the street from the Westboro Baptist Church. He bought the house for $86,000, and this past week, he painted it. He painted it the rainbow colors of the gay pride flag. The rainbow colors. And he also, by the way, erected a 30-foot flagpole, which you're allowed to do with zoning there, just as the Westboro Baptist Church has done. And on top of his flagpole, he is flying the gay pride flag. So there's no way that anybody in the Westboro Baptist Church can possibly miss their neighbors. Daniel, what do you make of it?
They are just such cartoon characters, such miserable people, you know? And for this guy to do that, I think he's a hero. And we're going to invite him on the show to be Activist of the Week, I think.
Yeah, indeed. It's just, you know, folks, it's a reminder that activism takes all forms. And, you know, in this show, we like to tell you about what's going on in the news and what you can do to influence outcomes. And we often do talk about things like contacting your member of Congress, either calling them or writing letters or starting petitions or using social media or getting your friends to read articles. Well, here's somebody who bought a house for his activism, and I guarantee the amount of free media that he got, the amount of media attention he got in terms of news stories and publicity that he got for this, I think was probably worth far more than the $86,000 that he paid. And it's a reminder that activism, particularly creative activism, is especially welcome. That if you think of an unusual or different sort of way to get your message out, the odds are that you're going to get that message out, especially if it's creative and bright and colorful like this guy in Topeka, Kansas. Coming up later in the show, we've got a lot of other fun things we're going to be talking about. Daniel Marans has an interesting debate with Michael Cohen, who's going to talk about what's going on in terms of U.S. policy towards Iran and also the U.S. approach towards Israel the past couple of weeks. And coming up in just a few minutes when our syndicated stations join us, we're going to take you through the president's trip to Israel and to Jordan. It was an incredible week where president, who had gone into this trip with about a 10% approval rating in the state of Israel, he spoke Hebrew. He spoke to students. He had an interesting news conference with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. And what impact will this have? We'll take you through some of what happened this past week. And again, the reason that Israel is so important to the United States is it's the United States' closest ally in the Middle East. It is the only democracy, of course, in the region. Long-standing ties between our two nations. And as President Obama said in Israel, Israel is not alone. The president is as close to Israel as it is to any country in the world. And when Israel is threatened by its neighbors, or when Israel faces a nuclear-armed Iran, as so many Israelis fear might be the case in the next year, that, of course, means the United States is essentially threatened because the United States has pledged to support and defend Israel under any circumstances. So just about a minute, we'll pause and let syndicated stations catch up, and then we'll take you through everything that happened in the Middle East this week. And Alan Rosenblatt, by the way, is going to be joining us later in the program. Alan's got a fascinating guest. Would you believe that Facebook is the subject of a new academic report on how Facebook deals with hate speech? Interesting topic there, both anti-Semitism and other stuff that often shows up in Facebook. So what is Facebook doing about this stuff that shows up? Well, you'd be surprised, and I think it's fair to say you will also be disappointed. But Alan Rosenblatt is going to bring us that segment in social media in our third hour. And again, a reminder, you can always subscribe to Take Action News TV on YouTube. Go to your YouTube channel, Take Action News TV. Also, click on iTunes and Stitcher to subscribe to our podcast. We pause now in 10 seconds for our syndicated stations. So glad to have you with us this weekend. You're listening and you're watching to Take Action News on We Act Radio.